Hello, this is Dread, and in today's video topic, a lot of people want me to update the Devouring Orb Smite Void Knight build that I was showcasing a few days ago when I did a 0 to hero run on it, where I realized that it felt really good to play. And I thought that, yeah, let's do that real quick because of the new passive tree and all that. But then I got a little bit ahead of myself. I started theory crafting and theory crafting and theory crafting, and then we landed on a different way of playing the build. So what you're going to do is you're going to follow this same kind of idea. You're going to level as a Void Knight. You're either gonna you're gonna level with the Deathless Sentinel leveling, then you're gonna swap into the Void Knight here, right, and level all the way to 90. Play this self cast smite stuff, right? But then once you get a decent amount of gear, you can make a swap into a better version of the build. And that's going to be multi strike, smite, crit, Void Knight alongside Devouring Orb. So the reason why this wasn't really a build before was one, multi strike wasn't like good, and two, Devouring Orb has been made so that you can automatically cast it while moving. What this does is it opens up your like options because now you don't have to play a build that has a bunch of cast speed because you're not constantly casting Devouring Orbs. This means that we can actually swap into multi-strike. And the reason why we're swapping into multi-strike is because we can convert the extra swords into, of course, smites. We can get up to 3 armaments. So every single time we attack with multi-strike, we are attacking with 3 armaments alongside with Bladestorm because we're going to hit with smites on the same target. This is important because turns out three smites every single time I attack is way better than 1 smite every time I cast. So multi-strike is just the superior option. Also as well, scaling attack speed is much easier to do so than scaling cast speed as well, which leads to this build being a lot better in the end, at least in my opinion. So let's talk about exactly how we're going to go about this. So we have multi-strike here, like I said. We're going for the extra armaments. Then we're going to grab the node that makes it so our swords turned into smites. Now it does cost full mana every single cast, which we'll talk about how we get around that later. And then we grab Bladestorm. So when you create more additional swords than there are nearby enemies, each remaining sword can consume mana to strike the nearest enemy, even if it was hit by the initial attack. Now, how do we get around the mana cost of this? Well, thankfully, we can just go with this node, max stacks, and not grab this one. So we're consuming 9 mana per cast. And if we go and look over here in base sentinel, we can just run time of faith, which gives us 10 mana. So we actually get 1 mana back, right? Whenever we're using it on, of course, whenever we're using it for clear, we'll gain mana back, and whenever we're using it on a single target, we'll get like 1 mana back. Now, this is important because we are going to be consuming mana for Devouring Orb and for Anomaly, so we need to make sure that we have a decent amount of mana sustain and regen, and like you can either build some mana regen on gear, like on your belt or something like that, right? On your amulet too. You could probably run it instead of this crit multi, to be honest with you. And that should be able to sustain our Devouring Orb and also as well sustain our Anomaly. Cool, right? And now, how do we get around with Smite costing full mana thanks to Hallowed Arsenal? How do we get around that? Well, we just run a wand. A lot of people don't understand that, like, you can just run a wand instead and get a minus mana cost as your skill. And when we do that, our smite, it costs 3 mana. And if we have -3 to 5 on our wand, all of a sudden, guess what? The mana cost goes away for smite. So we don't have to deal with that anymore. Now, of course, this means we have a little bit less attack speed, right? But it's worth it. Also, wands just have good stats like crit, spell damage, crit multi. Like, it's just good. You can either do this or you can go with a scepter with a tier 1 sealed minus mana cost mod. Either way, either run a wand or you run a scepter with a -3 mana cost on it. Either way, and you can run attack speed on that one. Either way, it works. The cheaper option would probably be a wand, but of course, you can always go for a scepter. There's like a lot of different ways you can go about this, but mainly just going for a wand is pretty good. Also, as well, later on, it opens up like options for like a ladle, or of course, you could utilize something like a wrong warp or something as well. Like there's a lot of different options of what you can use for your main hand, as long as it either is a wand with the minus mana cost on in the implicit, or a scepter with the -3 mana cost like mod that's sealed would be the good way to go on this. Then of course our offhand can be a Polaris, because we can get 3 extra smites per second, which is cool and all, but it's just a good item in general that has very low LP requirements as well. So it's just a bunch of extra smites per second, which is nice. Of course, I think we're gonna get like, I think it's gonna be like 9 smites per second right now with the current setup, and then this plus it'll be like a little bit more than that. So that should be a lot of smites. That's a lot more than what you see in the footage here, in the 0 to hero footage, by the way, which is why I think once you're done leveling this build, you should I heavily suggest, after the 10 out of 10 Harbinger grind, after you get some currency, you should be swapping into this version, because it's pretty much the same exact build, but instead of casting Smite, you're just attacking with multi-strike, which is just doing your smites for you. And I think that'll be much better. Like I said, you don't have to actually manually cast your Devouring Orbs anymore. Now, there is a caveat to this. There is a big caveat. When you are not moving, you will not be casting Devouring Orb. So either you have to cast Devouring Orb, or you have to make sure you're stutter stepping a little bit so you're casting Devouring Orb. I would suggest just doing the stutter step playstyle, where you stutter step just a little bit to keep casting your Devouring Orbs, right? So cool. That's the main way. Then, of course, we can just focus our smite on as much damage as possible here, damage here, damage here. Now, some people want to try to go for Order of Lagan and go for unbalanced scale, but the problem is that adds a giant mana cost to smite, and thankfully Devouring Orb is just a good clear skill, to be honest. Like, Devouring Orb is just a generically good clear skill, so you don't really need to like waste points in Smite to try to make it clear, when you can just have Devouring Orb. Like, I don't know if you guys have seen like the gameplay footage of this build, like in monos, but like I just walk around, dude. Like literally, I just walk around. And of course, when we have uh the new version where we, cast Devouring Orb while we're moving, like it's gonna be much better. And then we'll only just attack with multi-strike when we want to kill stuff, like when there's like a rare or something like that. So we don't have to grab all of this extra mana cost, because we just have Devouring Orb for clear. Turns out that's very convenient, right? But yeah, I'm not entirely sold on the Polaris. It's just lots of extra damage, but like obviously you could always go for something else later on. But this is like what I think would be the way to go. Obviously, this isn't like entirely min-max, right? Like I don't have like this idle stuff like here. Like it's not entirely min-max, but like this is kind of the way that I would go about pushing this build further, right? After this planar, I would get to like way more vitality on your gear, right? Then also as well get way more attack speed, and then like you'd be pretty much good to go at that point. Like I'd be pretty happy with that. Like get a pair of Ravenous Voids with attack speed on them, stuff like that. Like there's a lot of fun stuff you can do with this version, but I'm really happy with this. I think it's superior to the self-cast version once you get access to decent gear. And like I said, if you really need to, you can always swap the wand out for a scepter and get even more attack speed if you need it. But even with our current attack speed, the damage looks pretty absurd with this current smites that we have, and with the vitality scaling and all that. So I'm really excited to try something like this. What's really nice though is because of the crit on the tree here, we get crit here, right? And then we also get crit for just using sigils thanks to this node. This means that we actually end up getting very close to crit cap very quickly, even with only the 5% and 10% base crit at the top of the tree. As you can see, like with just a decent investment in the crit on our gear and stuff like that, we can easily get to the like high amounts of crit. And the reason for that being is there's a new node at the top of Void Knight here called crit chance, Mortal Cleave, that gives us base crit chance. This is absurd. This is like crazy. Just such a crazy node, just being able to like give us like 5% base crit for free, like this. Like that's crazy, dog. Like that's really good. So this is the route that I would suggest taking the character in, once you of course get comfortable with the self-cast version. So people were asking me, update this build. I have now updated it. play this version once you get comfortable with the character, right? Now, with all that being said, this has been Dread. I'll have to go do something else. Bye.